Among the more than 27,000 American military personnel held as POWs in the Pacific were 77 U.S. military nurses. Taken prisoner in the Philippines, the nurses were separated from their male counterparts in service and held with civilians in the Santo Tomas and Los Baños internment camps. One of these courageous nurses was Ruby Grace Bradley, who became known as the Angel in Fatigues. In 1934, Bradley entered the Army Nurse Corps as a surgical nurse and served at Walter Reed General Hospital until she was assigned to Station Hospital at Fort Mills, Philippine Islands in February 1940. A year later, she transferred to Camp John Hay in northern Luzon, where she was on December 7, 1941, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Hours after Pearl Harbor, the Japanese bombed the American defenses in the Philippines.
We heard this roaring over our heads, and we ran to the door like we always did. We could see the Japanese pilots. I actually identified them as being Japanese. And they flew right over, and they started dropping bombs around everywhere. We evidently lived a charmed life because the bombs fell all around the hospital, but not on it.
3 weeks after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Ruby was captured by the Japanese and moved to the Santo Tomas Internment Camp in Manila.
37 months in a Japanese prison camp during World War II, slowly starving so children could eat.
I'd save part of my food for the children later in the day when they start crying and be hungry.
Nurse Bradley shrank to 86 pounds. She used her ill-fitting uniform to smuggle surgical supplies into the POW camp.
And I was bulging here, bulging there, you know, with all sorts of equipment.
We smuggled in the instruments, and Ruby kept those at great risk to herself.
Bradley's courage saved many lives. She assisted in 230 operations, delivered 13 babies.
I knew I'd get through. I was just sure of it.
On February 3, 1945, U.S. troops stormed the gates of the Japanese camp and liberated Bradley and her fellow prisoners, ending her 3 years of captivity. Ruby served as a frontline Army nurse in evacuation hospitals in Korea.
A half-century ago, she was a frontline Army nurse in Korea, the day 100,000 Chinese soldiers overran American troops and started closing in on her hospital tent.
They were going to take me out first, and I didn't. I got behind something and stayed in. I was the last one out.
After she had loaded the sick and the wounded onto the plane that was sent for her.
We were receiving patients who'd been ambushed just 5 miles up the road.
Everything was happening and happening fast.
Communist snipers surrounded the plane. Major Bradley jumped aboard just as her ambulance exploded from an enemy shell.
You can get out in a hurry when you have somebody behind you with a gun.
Ruby Bradley came home to a hero's parade. She became the most decorated woman in American military history.
You know, a picture of these would weigh 10 pounds.
34 medals and citations for bravery, including 2 Bronze Stars. Bradley retired from the Army in 1963, but remained a nurse all her working life. She admits this was not the life Army recruiters promised in 1933.
They said, now don't worry, you won't be in any war. Yours and 2 of them.
But Ruby Bradley fought and fought fiercely for 6 years, not just in one war, but 2, determined to save lives while everyone around her was trying to take them.